For our next graph, we're going to be creating a histogram that reflects the frequencies we see in our grouped frequency distribution. So when we create a histogram, instead of highlighting the data that we created with our table information, we are actually going to highlight the raw data that were supplied in our initial data set. So I want to create a histogram of the Planck times, so I'll highlight my Planck time data. I'll go to Insert, and then the histogram is this blue one here. So we'll click on that, and you'll see that a chart pops up that has something looking like this. And on the y-axis, it'll be similar to when we created our simple frequency distribution, where that y-axis represents the frequencies. And then the x-axis, you could see the labels are in parentheses with a lower and an upper bound. And this, what is in those parentheses, those are what are called bins. So in this example, or what we have so far, are 3 bins that are separated by a certain number of seconds, which is our Planck time. So that's the unit that's on the y or x-axis. We can start by adding a chart title. So this is going to represent, it's a histogram of Planck times for the swim team. Okay, or we could just put Planck times for the swim team, grouped frequency distribution of Planck times for the swim team. Like, there's a lot of different options there. We will add our primary horizontal and primary vertical axes. The vertical axis is again going to represent the frequency for each group. The x-axis will represent the Planck time in seconds. So this is one of those examples where we would want to include the unit of measurement in parentheses, so Planck time in seconds. And in our group frequency distribution, we had intervals of 5 seconds. So when we try to change information or what these bins look like, it'll be slightly different for Mac, the Mac version, versus the Windows version. If you double click on the bins in Mac, that will allow you to change the bin width, number of bins, etc. In a Windows computer, you'll have to double click on the actual x-axis values in order to get this toolbar to pop up. I'm going to set my bin width to an interval of 5. So once I hit enter, you'll see now that I have bin widths. Now, I initially wanted to start my bin at 35 because that's what my grouped frequency distribution was set at. When we do histograms, we're not necessarily able to change that. So we kind of just have to take it as it is, where we have 38 to 43, 43 to 48, and all the way up to 103 to 108. So your frequency numbers won't exactly be the same because your groups, lower and upper bounds, are slightly different in this histogram than the table we made. But you can see that the values are relatively similar. The funny thing about histograms is that we are not able to adjust the y-axis values the same as we are when we are in a bar graph. So when you double click on the y-axis, it will just ask you what you want your minimum and maximum values to be, but you aren't able to necessarily edit the units by which your values increase as they go up the number line. So keeping it at the default of about 3.5, as long as it's anywhere between 3 and 4, the graph should be good to go. So the final graph should again have a chart title, 2 axes labels with appropriate units of measurement if applicable, and then each of your bin widths should be set to 5 so that you have a graph that ends up looking something like this.